Transmission is a really big word. Of course, it's an English word, and it has many, so it covers a number of different types of transmission within the Buddhist tradition as a whole. But if one can start from the simplest point of view, Buddhism's always been a person-to-person affair, a communication from one person to another, going back to the Buddha, and presumably in other world periods when there are other Buddhas with different names, the same is happening. It's always, with the sense in Dharma, is things only work by that person-to-person presence, one person to another. After all, the key point in Dharma teaching is everybody has the potential to awaken. And the way to awaken is in a way by the spark jumping from one person to the next. If she has those qualities manifesting, it can somehow stimulate the potential for those qualities in me to awaken. So presence, one person to another. Going back to those in our history, Buddhist history, those men and women around the Buddha, whose the presence, the guide, the instruction of the Buddha would transmit something to them. So that then is elaborated in various ways in the Buddhist tradition. For instance, one is the transmission of refuge, the giving of the refuges, the refuge ceremony, taken first by the first disciples who want to commit to the Buddha's form of practice. They took refuge, they repeated the words after Buddha, and that then becomes a transmission of refuge from then on to this present day. Or those, the transmission of moral vows. So whereas the lay followers of the Buddha would perhaps take the training to abandon violence and stealing and so on, the basic lay precepts, 5 at most in number. Those who wanted to be full-time practitioners, so to speak, in emulating Buddha, would take the monastic vows, transmitted to them by the Buddha, say, these are the rules, you can now choose to follow them. And they would say, yes, we choose to follow these rules, such and such. So there's the transmission of what we call the Vinaya, the discipline, the moral discipline, mainly for monks and nuns, but also in an abbreviated form for lay people. Then there's the transmission of the Bodhisattva vow, the greater ethical commitment to follow the path to Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. That's a transmission. Buddha gave this vow to others, so among his disciples, those who wanted to emulate his example, and therefore the Bodhisattva vow is in existence. From one person who's in a way the embodiment of what the vow represents, to others who start to cultivate and live by that vow. So then the Bodhisattva vow is transmitted. Then in the Vajrayana, the essential form of transmission is through there's many types, but principally through the initiations, through the reading transmissions, and the guiding instructions. They're all transmitted person to person, because without that they have no life. They're just words in a book or theories or something like that. But they come alive because one person who's gone has some experience of what that teaching is about. If they're Buddha, full experience. If they're a more ordinary teacher, some experience at least. They can stimulate, they can somehow convey it to you in a live way so that you can then make it your own, and then you can transmit it to somebody else. So right, Buddhism is like a communicable disease. That's it. One person to another, transmission. That transmission could be with one person to one person or one person to 100. It depends, of course, on the circumstances, as it did in the Buddha's lifetime. But without transmission, it's dead. That's why we say there are certain teachings which were given originally and were transmitted, but the living human transmission died. So even though some of those instructions are written in the scriptures, they exist still in literary form, and you could read them, but they wouldn't work. Those practices, for instance, would not work because there's no living transmission. And that's why for all of us, the serious Dharma practitioners, to receive transmission, if we want to study and practice something, particularly practice something, we need to receive the transmission in whichever way it has been transmitted. So it's a person. There's no way around this thing. It is a person-to-person transmission. Dharma is like that. And there's no other way, not electricity, not chemicals, not any other way, but just human to human transmission is the essence of the Dharma.